about talking about
Oh,
compliance. Oh no,
yeah, we live.
no, I thought I said oh. Great. So with us, I have Shai Cohen. I have Shel Phillips. Or Shai Cohen's our CEO for Kamanja. Brainchild, kind of has brought Kamanja to life and made it the amazing thing it is. Michelle Phillips, an expert in the compliance industry, really brings a lot of knowledge, especially MCMMC and other areas like that. We'll be joined by Mark Menzies here later on. And I'm Martin Perkins. I'm the channel director for Kamanja. So the goal here today is that we're really trying to help MSPs understand how critical risk management and risk assessment is when you're actually developing. There's Mark. Greetings, sir. How are you? Let him get his ears in. We're fine. But the goal really is to make sure that we are expressing how critical it is when you're sculpting and crafting your security plans for your clients. How critical risk management is from the entire gamut, from the initial development of understanding what your processes are, all the way to risk assessment and doing the remediation and mitigation of those risks, and try to understand fully what that looks like. So that's what the purpose of our show is today, or our talk is today. So, Shai, if you want to go ahead and share that, I'm going to go ahead and we're so beyond basics. Risk management is the cornerstone of MSP success. So thanks for that, Mark. Mark's having some audio issues, so he'll be with us here in a moment. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start rolling through the webinar here. So, really, the key to this whole process is MSP landscapes are changing, and a standardized stable of services is not enough. And what I mean by that is, for a long time, having your basic antivirus and various tiers of controls as a standard stack was what you needed really to kind of make sure your clients were safe, or at least safe enough at the time. And the landscape has gotten so complex, and the attack vectors have gotten so diverse that really isn't enough anymore. I mean, it really, especially with all the different compliance components coming in, a proper risk assessment is a core component of a lot of those. So that being said, making sure that you have done risk management for your client is key to actually making sure you're not just keeping them safe, but you're actually spending the money where you need to be on your clients and making sure that they're protected. And risk management is the process of identifying, assessing, prioritizing, mitigating risks to minimize their likelihood and impact. Is really what it boils down to. Is it's unpacking a business. It's not layering on the controls like I mentioned before, but it's actually identifying what are their core processes, what are their core assets, and then what are the risks associated with those assets, and going through an actual in-depth process of that is kind of what we're after here. So let's break it down, and you start with identification. So the first thing you need to do is identify what risk could fall. So when you're going through that, you're going to go look at, okay, so you have a process. A process is critical to your infrastructure. And by the way, anybody that wants to jump in, feel free to kind of chime in as you feel necessary. But is identifying the process that you have, and you're going to look at what threats are associated with those processes, and what your vulnerabilities are associated with those threats. So for example, let's say we have our accounts receivable process. That's a process that you would want to identify the process of risks. And so you have your accounts receivable process and what the threats are. So you have various components in that process, from the people that are involved in it to the software that you're using, all those things. And so you're going to look at what the threats are to those various components of that process. And then you're going to look at what vulnerability that lays you open to effectively. So you have some threats, say that you're using cloud-based software for your invoicing, and you have a threat of compromise to that, and what vulnerabilities, what impact that can have on your company, and then what that risk looks like. And so then you're going to actually go through and assess all those risks, as noted on that second bubble. You're going to analyze the likelihood of their occurrence and the potential impact. And so what that means is, what are the odds that's going to happen? How strong are the odds that risk is going to come to fruition, and if it does, what impact it's going to have on your organization, how much it's going to impact, how much it's going to cost your organization, things like that. And the next round of that is you're going to have to figure out how to deal with those risks. Now there's three ways to deal with risk. You have risk mitigation, which is obviously the best way to do it. You want to make sure that you're minimizing risk whenever you can. And then you also have risk transference, which would be, something like insurance or something along that line, and acceptance. There's going to be some scenarios, especially anything's going to have an inherent risk, even if you've done every control that you can to make sure that it's been protected. But some risks are going to, at the end of the day, have to be accepted, because if you look at residual risks to your assets or processes, those are still going to be there even if you've done everything you can. There's still 0 day risk. There's still all kinds of things that can happen that are still going to mean that process still has a risk, or that asset still has a risk associated with it. And so that's an acceptance. But risk mitigation is really obviously what our job is, right? As MSPs, our job is to go through and develop a plan of attack to take that list of risks that we've broken down based on what the business is actually doing and what is critical to their business, and then actually developing a plan to mitigate those risks as much as possible. So the next step is then
Hey,
going to be, oh, go
Martin.
ahead, Shai. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Shell, thank you for joining us. Much appreciated. Martin, thank you for the long brief and explanation. Shell, you doing tons of risk management to your clients, and you are one of the masters that I know in the market how to identify risk and mitigate them.
Yep.
Can you please share with us a little bit from your experience? What do you see during your daily work from your variety of clients that you have? Because I know that you're sharing from small, medium businesses, even larger companies. So please share with
You bet.
us.
You bet. I'll take a second here and sort of simplify some of this. This is a lot about risk, 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 and the whole thing of
Yeah,
security is about risk. But I will say this: there's an easy way to sort of get your arms around risk, and that's picking a framework. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But the point is that the framework will tell you the categories of risk and the controls under each of those categories of how to actually control and mitigate that risk. And so sort of the foundation before you even get deep into this, where do I start with risk, how do I find it, and that sort of thing, is actually start with a framework and work out from there, because that will give you a really good platform in which to lay it all out. And I know Kamanja is a great platform for actually identifying those various pieces, and you'll probably see that a little bit later. But that's what I would say is, before you get in too deeply into risk identification and monitoring and assessment and all those sorts of pieces, the easy approach, probably the step stool approach, is to
yeah,
get a framework, start there.
absolutely. Yeah, the framework will give you guidelines like how do you going to attack that, right? So yeah, and that's awesome. So what is a common a what is your common, if you can share with us, with our audience, what is your common technique that you did? Just one use case, one quick example. We have a lot to talk in this webinar today, and we will see a lot from your knowledge. But if you can give us, a small or a quick use case, how do you
Sure.
identify to mitigate it? Will be awesome.
Well, this might be jumping ahead a little bit, but I'll tell you my approach
Yeah,
to sort of working with clients. And remember, you have to do this as an MSP. You have to do this to yourself first. You have to be able to understand the process, how you implement all the tools and procedures and all that sort of thing. You need to do it to yourself first. But let's say we're going to work with a new client. And first thing I do is some sort of security assessment. I can do it easily by getting a global reader, looking through their structure, seeing what their users look like, what their equipment looks like, what their software looks like, kind of do an assessment of their overall position. Now, the next thing I do is I make sure that licensing is aligned. In other words, that they've
yeah,
purchased the right licensing, that it has the right add-ons to give you the full complement of security tools and configurations. In the case of Microsoft, it might be all the P2 items added on. So I do licensing second, and then I go through and I do a fortify or hardening, where we actually go through and actually do all the configurations that are necessary to make the system uh, uh, resilient and secure. And then we do the compliance part where we do documentation, and that's where Kamanja comes in as a GRC, where you can actually right now I have about 20 documents that I manage and a spreadsheet timeline. And so we keep all those things organized. It's several hundred pages of documentation, procedures, templates that I've written, and things that are available. But it's a little hard to juggle and manage, especially for multiple clients. And so that's where Kamanja is going to come back into the scene here in a moment and fill that whole piece in, because that's the control, that's the assignment of tasks and all those sorts of pieces. So we do that, and then I can do an ongoing compliance agreement where each month I work with the client to make sure that they're reviewing the risks, that they're mitigating the risks, that they're doing the things on their plan of attack and milestones, their POAM, and keep things in order. So that's kind of the overview of the process. That's kind of behind what Martin's talking about here. And this is good stuff. It's kind of high level, but when you get right down to it practically, there is an approach. There is a methodology to do all this.
Absolutely. Yes,
Michelle, I had a question for you, Michelle. So you talked about frameworks and picking one. How would I, as an MSP, obviously different client bases would garner different frameworks that would be most appropriate for their clients. How do you go about assessing what framework you would think would be best to apply to your client?
Typically, a framework is chosen based on the industry they're in. For example, if you're healthcare, you're going to do a HIPAA framework. If you're criminal justice, you're going to do a CJIS, Criminal Justice Information Services. If you're in DoD, the government, you're going to do a NIST 800-171 or CMMC, level 2 possibly. Or if you're in the credit card business, you're going to do a PCI DSS. There's a number of frameworks, but the one that's actually sort of the generic fits everybody is CIS 18. CIS 18 is not regulated. It doesn't come from any legislation. It's out there as a framework that's solid. It's a good foundation to move up to CMMC. It covers HIPAA. It covers most of CJIS, ITAR. It's a good foundational framework, and we could talk about that later if you want. But the thing to do is you start with the client's industry. What are they in? What do they need to do? They might need a SOC 2 type 2. They might need whatever it might be. And so you start there. You don't probably force on them anything that you think is right, just because you have to figure out, do a little work. You need a little conversation with the client. You need to find out what they need.
You mentioned SOC 2 Type 2, and I've been hearing a lot of our partners mentioning that they're getting requests from their clients for SOC 2 Type 2 certifications, just to make themselves feel better and know they're dealing with entities that have had that external audit that's required as part of that SOC 2 Type 2.
So a SOC 2 Type 2 is more of an accounting certificate, an accounting audit. It's not so much primarily on security, although it does talk about the security of financial information. But it's something that the insurance companies have picked up on. They think that that's going to be important, and so they're pressing on that.
Totally agree with you about it. I can't say that SOC it's a framework. It's like when you do financial auditing, this is kind of the same. It's talk about security. It's talk about privacy. He has the own TSP and kind of things. But I can't say it's a regulation or it's a framework that you're following. We have done a lot of them. Good stuff, Shell. Amazing. I like that. Martin, do you want to move to the next slide?
No, yeah, definitely. So one of the things that goes through, on the previous slide, we talked a lot about assessing and all the things that we through the risk management process. One of the things that's key throughout this entire process is making sure you're in constant communication with the client. That makes sure you're as you're going through, and obviously initially you're going through and asking questions about their company, finding out what they have active in their company, what kind of data they're storing, what kind of processes they have in place, if they're largely physical, if they're a diverse marketplace. This will change dramatically how you go about this risk assessment. And then going through what risks you find and what mitigations that you're looking at. All this stuff needs to be signed off and discussed with the stakeholders. So when you're talking about communication, you're identifying not just key leadership, but you're also identifying stakeholders in the organization. So any team leaders, things of that nature, folks that own processes are going to know more about individual components than say a CEO might about that process, because they've delegated that down, obviously. So keeping in constant communication throughout that process is going to be critical as you're going through the risk process.
One thing to know about that before you move ahead
Yeah.
is typically security does not get inherited from the bottom up.
Yeah.
It has to start at the top and be pressed down, usually
Mhm.
socialized. You're going to make some requirements of people like multi-factor authentication or changing your password more frequently, things like that, that you actually have to say, no, I'm sorry, this is our new security posture. And you have to
Yep.
push it from the top down. It's really difficult to find some IT
Yeah.
guy that says, oh, yeah, I get what you're doing, but they're never going to be able to push it up. So
Yeah.
top down.
So I think one of the most important thing in communication as an MSP, even that you think that this component is with the likelihood and impact in the eye level, maybe after communicate it with the stakeholders, which is can be the executive of your client executive or any other else on the company, it's making change. So communication for me, when we do risk assessment, even internally, communication is the most important part, because it can save you tons of money and it can save you a lot of time. It's how to identify and analyze which risks are really important and which of them are really relevant for us, because in some cases you may find that it's good to address it, but you don't need to be focused on that, because the likelihood that the impact is so low that maybe it's not be relevant to spend time and money on that and be focused on reduced risks that are more really high risk with high likelihood and impact, if that makes sense to you, Shell.
Yep.
And going back to what Shell said earlier, it's when you're communicating, it's going to be pushed down from the top down. One of the things that I found was really beneficial, I always looked for cheerleaders, that department head that really understood what was going on and kind of helped champion some of the stuff that you're pushing down. So, keep them involved, and that really helps drive some of these initiatives. As because your upper level can mandate, but until you get buy-in, because that's really what you're going to have to get for full on adoption. To get that buy-in, finding those cheerleaders in the corporation or entity, whatever you're dealing with, really helps kind of move the agenda forward as you see someone picking it up, their coworker picking it up, your coworkers, moving that security initiative forward. It really helps move some of these things forward.
Yeah.
All right. So how does risk management differ from a gap analysis? So, risk management and gap analysis, when you're looking at, say, a framework, you're looking at a gap analysis from a differential between what the control states and where you're currently at. A risk assessment or risk management is actually going through and holistically assessing all of the entities, organizations. So, like Shell said, the great place to start is a framework, but there are going to be things that fall outside that in some instances as well. So that's where the full risk management process comes into place. And so your purpose for risk management obviously is to actually assess, mitigate, and monitor risks that can affect your organization, where your gap analysis is strictly looking at what the current state is versus what your desired state is. So, Shell, would you mind elaborating a little bit about the difference between, say, a compliance framework and an actual security risk management assessed, if that makes sense? That was poorly
Well,
stated.
I'll do one you better. I'll tell you how security and compliance fit together.
Mm-hmm.
This is an example I use all the time. Compliance does not equal security, but security is dependent on compliance. So here's the example. Let's say you have a written password policy. You only have to have 6 characters in your password. You never have to change it, and you don't have to use MFA. It's a policy, it's written, and you could comply to it, but you're not secure. Okay.
Absolutely.
Conversely, you could have a really great password policy that says 16 characters in your password, you have to change it every 90 days, and you must use MFA. But if you don't comply to that policy, it's not secure.
You're
So
absolutely.
the two relate together really closely. And so when you're looking for things like this, you need to really understand how they play. Compliance isn't just a sort of a buzz word for oh yeah, well, we're compliant. No, that means that you're following the rules. That's what compliance means, not
Mhm.
just, oh, we've looked at it and we think we know what we're doing. So that's probably the risk. Now, I like this idea of gap analysis. Risk management is the whole exercise of managing risk. Gap analysis, on the other hand, that's like, where do I want to be and where am I? What's the
Mhm.
difference between the two? And then figuring out a plan of how to get from where you are to where you want to be. So that's probably a good definition. I like the words that you put up here, but that's really important. And when you go through a process with a client, you have to do a gap analysis. That's what your assessment is all about.
Mhm.
Security assessment
Absolutely.
is your gap analysis. Where are we? Where should we be? And then
Mhm.
when you go ahead and manage the risk, that's the rest of the compliance project.
Yeah. Most of the compliance framework have controls about how to conduct a risk management. This is just a different thing from gap analysis. This is why we put it here. The reason that we spoke with few MSPs, uh, and they thought that the doing the gap analysis, it's like doing a risk assessment. The answer for that it's no. When you do a gap analysis, is just where you are right now in terms of compliance framework. Risk assessment is a different part of the framework of the compliance. So, and this is a huge differentiation that people need to understand. A risk management is a different league. It's a different thing for just go over the controls, say yes, no. Um, yeah, two different purpose, two different processes. It's a huge thing. So yeah,
Well, and that's really a big differential between Comanche and other platforms that we start. We do a risk. We're framing everything within the risk assessment format. We're doing the gap analysis, but it's all framed within that risk analysis framework, which really helps understand exactly what the risks are and making sure you're right sizing your security and hitting all your compliance points as well.
yeah, cool. Um, there you go.
So this is the process of risk management. You start with risk identification. We talked about that earlier. Going on to a risk assessment where you're actually assessing the risk, and that was kind of what Shai talked about a little earlier. About so we have our likelihood and our impact. We have a risk number, and then we have to prioritize our risks and then go through and develop a plan for risk mitigation. So obviously you're starting with your high likelihood, high impact stuff first, and then you're going to your high impact, low likelihood, and then and so on and so forth. And then your low likelihood, low impact are going to be the ones that you fit in when you can get those done. But that's where that risk mitigation goes into, and the prioritizing. This goes into as you've hit your risk assessment component, you've actually identified what risks your client has, then you have to go through and develop a plan for it. Obviously, that's part of the next step. That's your job is to develop a security plan for your client, and whether that be like Shell was talking about hardening their M365. I mean, it could be something as simple as validating physical controls on their servers and making sure that laptops are being handled the way
Yeah,
they should be and USB sticks are being locked down, things of that nature. So again, it's going to fall into that spectrum of how likely is it to happen, how impactful is it going to be. And then the next step, and this was on earlier side, but risk monitoring, right? You have to basically validate that your controls that you put into place are having the affected or the desired effect on the risk, right? That it's minimizing those impacts, it's minimizing occurrences, things of that nature. And that's a process of assessing and reevaluating risks as things occur. Because obviously, you may put a control in place and find out that structurally in the organization that you're having some issues. The culture is not accepting that particular control, and whether that's a push down from your managing entities, or whether that's
yeah,
changing the control to make it more conducive with the culture. That's a process you're going to have to go through. Shell, do you have something to say on that?
No, I think you're right. The big key is no understanding what your client's business is. What are they trying to do? Not what you're trying to make them do. And what they're trying
yeah,
to accomplish, whether it's make money, save people, whatever the idea is that's got to fit into the security plan. That's a core piece of it. And if, in
Yep.
fact, your security plan matches their business goals, then yeah, it's a lot easier to sell it. You can socialize it much easier. Yeah, we're trying to be the best advertising company in the world. Okay, in order for you to meet those goals, you need to secure your data, and so you go through the process. And this is why, in fact, when we teach our how to develop a policy, we talk about
Yep.
tying the business goals into the control. This is why we're doing this control. And that it's just such an easier sell. Plus, right within the text, the users, the people that are responding to the plan, the security plan, can see why they're doing that control. And it's a lot easier to sell. It's a lot easier to push through.
Right, and then if you're fighting the culture the entire time, I mean, if you're not meshing with the culture as opposed to fighting it, because that's that I see a lot of entities go in and they have their stack and they're trying to push an agenda that really isn't tied to anything integral to the company. And that's going back to why it's so important to risk management. You're inherently tying yourself to the actual risk to the organization and what their business objectives are, and making sure that they're actually driving those forward, as opposed to just kind of cookie cuttering, what you're pushing out as a stack.
This is a good time for one of my soapboxes, and that's what are MSPs in the business of? And as far as I'm concerned, my MSP is in the business of helping people, helping them be secure, helping them succeed,
Yep.
those sorts of things. And if you're just trying to get through a project so you can make the money and go on to the next thing, you're not helping people. You're just sort of beating them up for money. And that's the last one you'll win if you approach it that way.
Yeah.
So
I think that's all the idea. When you do compliance and risk management, it's not about the project, it's not about the money, it's just know that there is a lot of, malicious things in the world, and you can help companies. This is how we started our journey in Kamanja. It's like we believe that we can do good for MSPs and small medium businesses by developing a great solution that will help them and help their clients, following some framework that help them be secure, right? This is all about when you be secure, so you reduce your potential risk from many ways: financial, reputation, and many other vectors of the company. I think when you're handling those kind of things, when you're handling compliance and and risks mitigation and risk management, it's like it's not about the money of the project, it's about doing good to the world. And this is what we believe in here. And this is why we listen to every single of our clients, that make sure that he get the premium and best in class product that he needs to do this job. So
100% agree. And echo Shell 1,000% is your job is to help companies, and they're succeeding, you're succeeding, and everything goes well. And then the final component of that is risk reporting, making sure you're communicating well everything that's happening with an organization. I mean, that's pretty key. And this goes back to also, even if you've gone through and done a full remediation plan, letting them know that there are still residual risks, and here's what that looks like, and here's they can be prepared for it, because they're going to need action plans, disaster recovery, all that kind of stuff is still a thing, right? You can do as much preventive measures as you want by making sure you're also going through the process of that DR preparedness, and making sure they have plans for the unlikely event, as well as you prepared them that something does happen, they're prepared for that as well. So and so there's a 5-step process that that we kind of put together for an MSP to begin managing risks, right? The first is understanding your client's environment. We've talked about this several times, asking the questions, right? Finding out what they're doing, what kind of data they're storing, what their processes look like, what their employee composition looks like, identifying potential risk areas and creating lists, and then using a risk management framework. And we talked about several. We're bringing up here ISO 31000 and NIST RMF, but we also talked about CIS earlier. But taking one of those frameworks and applying it to those areas, keep communicating with the client, and then take the action to mitigate those risks that you've identified based on the gap analysis of the framework.
So it should be obvious to all viewers at this point that these 5 things are elements within Kamanja. I would hope that you get that. Okay, these are the pieces. These are the pieces that Kamanja provides. The only thing I would add to that soup is you, the operator, the person managing the process. And it's up to you to sort of make this process go smoothly. Like Martin says, communicate and socialize and do those pieces. Kamaja will do the mechanics of tracking and evaluating and that sort of thing. You still have to do a good deal of work to make sure that it really is secure. So hopefully by now you're getting the point. There's 5 pieces that Kamaja does really well. These are the 5. And reporting is a big one when you come back to the client, say, here's what we found, here's what needs to happen. But remember that it's all about security, not just a report, oh, okay, I see those things. Yeah, we'll get to it when our budget allows. You can't be subject to a budget. You have to really help them understand that security has to happen now and not later. And so this is the tool to use, and hopefully that's become obvious to you through this presentation.
Definitely. Thanks for that plug. We definitely make the process that we were talking about easy in Kamaja, and we keep it all in one place in an area where they interact with each other, right? And they actually feed off of each other as you're going through. So when you're ingesting your assets, that goes into the risk management process as opposed to just identifying those and keeping it in the spreadsheet.
Yeah. Martin, maybe you can share with our audience some use case that you may think it would be a good fit for MSPs, same as Shell, did in the beginning, maybe a little bit more deep dive on that. So that you can imagine that can be, for example, Office 365 risk management, risk analysis. Maybe we can give them one of those examples. I think it would be great.
Yeah. So I ran an MSP for several years, and I'll be honest with you, the tack that I took, and we weren't as mature as Shell back in the day, but the process we went through, we had best in class processes to secure areas, and we had some hardening documents from various entities, and it wasn't until we actually started going through and working through some actual frameworks where we actually identified what kind of data our clients were holding in that. Okay, so now we know what kind of data. Now, based on that, what compliance frameworks are applicable, and the nice thing about Kamaja is you can apply multiple frameworks and you can do some cross mapping between those. So as you're looking at your if you want to do basic CIS assessment, then you want to layer that in with other frameworks, you can do that. And so, but that really helped us understand what kind of risk our clients were going through, because layering in standard controls it's a good stopgap, but it's not really assessing and analyzing what the environment looks like.
Okay. Shell, you want to add something?
Yeah, I just think, I've dragged my feet for a couple of years now trying to pick up a GRC because, they all say the same thing, but they don't all do the same thing. And I've just been shopping for the right one. I think this is the right one. And looking forward to the organization, to the scheduling, to the pieces that actually are meaningful to me. It's a real ball juggle when you have several clients and they're in various states of the process, and you're trying to remember, okay, what was I supposed to do for that client this week? And this is going to be a great tool. I'm looking forward, and I'll be honest, I have not adopted it yet because some things going on in my life that I haven't had the time to really stop and do that. But this is the last piece that fits into our security strategy that's going to automate many, many things and going to make it useful. And it will track when there's changes. It will document when you make changes. It will be proof that you're actually reviewing risk on a regular basis. It will be the demonstration, the place you can go to. You can take your client, you can take your auditor, you can take users to it and say, here's what's happened over the last 6 months, the ways that we've improved security and so on. So it's going to help you in your sales process with your clients as well, as you can build reports out of it, show them what's happening, what progress you're making. But it's just going to be a good organizer. It's like having a Microsoft project, for example, to manage a project. Well, this too will actually organize and coordinate your efforts so that you can develop a plan of attack, plan of action, and milestones, and you can actually take your staff and a client through that. You can also link off exhibits and examples and evidence that you're doing these things for some sort of authoritative body that's going to come in and assess or audit. So it gives you a platform. It gives you a place to keep stuff. It gives you a secure uh, method for tracking all of your efforts. And so
Mhm.
I think that's where it really fits into any security strategy and stack. It's really a key to making sure all the pieces are held together and tracked, and you can prove it.
I think that just to piggyback on that, Shell, that this is not a single assessment based platform. This is an ongoing, living, breathing part of how you manage onboarding, offboarding, client or end users, managing policies, disseminating policies. All the attestation is held within that, as well as all the changes as they happen within your organization. Those are all documented as they happen, and so you have a current, up to date risk assessment ad infinitum. I mean, you're continually having that updated and managed as changes occur within an organization. So it's not that, all right, we're going to go through an assessment and then we'll have to go through another assessment in a year. This is we're just going to keep you up to date. So next year, when you need to prove to the powers that be, whatever that might be, here's like Mr. Auditor, here's your login for our platform. Review as necessary. See that we're still within our bounds and go on. And so that's really one of the big benefits that Kamanja brings, is that we house that for you ongoing, and it's a living platform that you'll be able to continue to change with as you go ahead. So
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Um, so what next, Martin? So if we understand what we're covering in this session to now, we get an amazing use cases from you and from Shell. We talk in high level on the scenario and the workflow and how to conduct a real risk management.
mhm.
So what's
So
next for your opinion?
we spoke earlier
Yeah.
on clients needing an expert in their area. So one of the things that we recommend is identifying a target rich vertical in your market, right? So you know what your business is, your areas, find an area that you can really focus on and really start driving some of this in, whether it be HIPAA, whether it be CMMC, it could be any one of the frameworks that are out there, but find something that you can get some traction on, that you have some targets to go through. So identify some of those, and then identify what frameworks are applicable. So you have between FTC safeguards, PCI, HIPAA, you're going to have a lot of overlaps on some of these. So find out what frameworks apply to that target vertical that you've looked at, and so find one. But let's start with one of those frameworks and perform a practice assessment. And Kamanja is a great platform to do that on. One of the things that I wanted to mention is, like, with just a partner program with Kamanja, you have the risk assessment component built in, so you can do that as part of your prospecting, that kind of thing, as you go through. So you can do as many risk assessments as you'd like to do on individual clients as you're going through. Once you wanted to get the frameworks and you're starting to manage that client proactively, that's where your additional frameworks come in. But pick one of those frameworks and do an assessment on that on yourself to kind of identify what the process looks like. Because unless you've done it yourself, unless you've kind of dug in and looked at all the components of your own organization in that same light, it's going to be really challenging to kind of layer it onto one of your clients. And then register for our 4-hour course. We have in November, we have a 4-hour risk assessment course coming up. It's going to be basically risk management and MSP bootcamp. We're going to have 4 1-hour training sessions from the 20th to 23rd of November. And it's going to cover a host of information. But it's going to start for the basics. It's really going to help you kind of get through initially identifying components of risk, what the frameworks look like. So we're going to have introduction to risk management, where we're going to basically talk about the importance of risk management. We're talking about identifying risks in MSP and subsequently your SMB clients with some case studies and things like that. We're going to go through risk assessment and analysis. That's going to be on day 2. We're going to go through some risk remediation processes. So what kind of controls you're going to be implementing to mitigate some of these risks. as you go through. And then we're going to go on day 4. We're going to cover risk monitoring and reporting on how to actually be proactive on these control sets that you've applied to the risks, and then how to report those up the chain. So it's going to be a really great 4 hour in 1 hour increments block of material that will really help you guys kind of get your head around what it looks like to start deploying this for your clients as well as yourselves. We're gonna have some guest speakers popping in to those sessions as well, so that look out for those. Those should be fun. We'll be advertising this obviously as we go through, but that would be it's gonna be a great opportunity for that. So find a framework that makes sense. Go through some application on your own. We do offer like a 2-week trial of Kamanja if you want to just kind of hop in there and try out some of these frameworks and see what that looks like. If you want to do that prior to the boot camp, that'd be ideal. And then join that class.
Yep, I put the link for registration on the comment, so you all can register. You can find it also on the post. So just register. It's going to be fun. We have a great guest there and you can learn a lot from that. I think it will be a good a good advance for MSP that don't know how to do it, don't know where to start from, and also advanced MSP that already do compliance, maybe make compliance and risk management. Maybe we can help them a little bit more with identifying some use cases that we bring to the table from all of our knowledge that we bring in the last couple of years. So
helping refine the process, and again, bringing it into one
yeah,
platform makes that easy. You may be have been using checklists and spreadsheets and a whole host of things to kind of manage this process prior. You may have all the tools in place to make it happen, but we may be able to give you some help on how to streamline that and make the delivery significantly easier.
yeah. Before we're wrapping up, Shell, I remember that when we created this deck, we talked about and we say that when we go, Martin, can you please go back to one slide?
Sure.
Yeah, and one more. Sorry, two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So when we discussed, if you remember, about the subcategories. So, for me, like people understand by examples. We can talk about, many things, but if we're not giving example, people may understand and may not, but we want to make sure that everyone is understand. So on the
Sure.
second point, please go ahead.
Yeah, there's Kamanja's not just for your entertainment and another cost. You can make money using these tools and doing compliance. I'll give you a handful of ways you can. Certainly, the assessment you can charge for. I don't charge for it if it's part of another project that I'm going to do. I do a free assessment if I'm going to get a follow-on compliance gig. You certainly will make money on correcting the licensing, getting the right licenses, getting them lined up properly, getting all the supplemental security add-ons and that sort of thing. So you can make money on licensing. You can do a fortification where you actually go through and harden that environment. That's part of Kamanja's risk mitigation process, but you can make money just doing the hardening on somebody. You can make money on the whole compliance gig, writing their policies and procedures, their compliance documentation. You can make money with that, and Command is a big tool for that. And then finally, you can have an ongoing commitment from your client that you're going to help them monthly. You're going to check in. Here's what's changed. Here's what you need to do. Here's the plan. And you can make money at that too. I charge between $2,500 and $3,000 a month for a client to keep them compliant. And you could, so the point is Command is a good money making tool as well for MSPs. It's not just another cost. It's not just another thing that you have to deal with, but it actually can be leveraged into revenue. And I will say, greenfield in cybersecurity, there is so much work to be done and so few that know how to do it. It's a green field. So that's what I would say.
Like
this approach to compliance is definitely you'll be on the leading edge on pushing through this as you adopt. So
that's awesome. Great. So let's wrapping this out, Martin. So you want to close the session, or maybe we can give to our guest Shell to close this up.
But Shell, I'll give him the honors.
Yeah,
Okay.
the honor
All
to
right.
serve, my friend.
Just a couple things for you to remember as viewers. Number one, compliance and security are a two-headed coin. You can't separate them. Number two, you need to have a strategy, a methodology, a way to approach this. You need to apply it to yourself first so you understand the process, but then you need to follow that process, that methodology to the T yourself. And then finally, get good tools. Don't buy a bunch of tools because we've limited it down to just about a handful that are really key in our stack rather than getting I know a client that has hundreds of to 100 tools that he has to manage and keep up with. Don't do that. Simple is better. And so that's how I would close. I would say this is a great facility for managing all of those pieces, the loose ends, and just be sure that you understand the process. And finally, it's a big world out there. Greenfield and compliance. Go for it.
Thank you,
Thanks so much,
Shell.
Chuck. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Appreciate one of our favorite friends in the market and very close to us. And we love you so much. Thank you for having it with us. We love you. We appreciate you. And Martin, thank you for doing that. You are on a vacation, and I just dragged you out from your family. Thank you for that. Thank you for leading this session. Um, and see you soon. Very soon.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you joining us. Thanks so much.
Thank you.